Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. Today's story is a difficult one for me to tell, a journey into a place I never thought I'd find myself, but your messages and stories have given me the strength to share my own. It's called She Said Tinder Was Just a Game Until It Wasn't. And it began as so many modern tragedies do, with a little notification light blinking innocently on a phone. Her name is Anja, was Anja, to me anyway. Now she's just a collection of memories, some sharp and beautiful, others blurred and corroded by what came after. We had what I thought was a good marriage, a real one. 10 years of building a life, not just cohabiting. We navigated the choppy waters of mismatched ambitions, the quiet grief of a miscarriage, the dizzying joy of buying our first ridiculously overpriced apartment in the city. We had our language, a shorthand of glances and half-finished sentences that could convey entire paragraphs of meaning across a crowded room. I felt known by her, truly seen in a way that made the rest of the world feel a little less chaotic. The routine was comfortable, a well-worn jumper on a chilly evening. Friday nights were for pizza and a bottle of Primitivo, Saturdays for long walks along the canals, Sundays for newspapers and the quiet hum of domesticity. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe the comfort became a cage for her, the predictability a poison. I'll never really know for sure, but the catalyst for the collapse arrived with the casualness of a weather report. It was a Tuesday evening, rain lashing against the windows of our fourth-floor apartment, the city lights bleeding into watercolor streaks on the glass. I was making risotto, stirring the arborio with the meditative rhythm I always found soothing, the scent of garlic and white wine filling our small kitchen. Anja was on the sofa, curled under a gray cashmere throw, her face illuminated by the cool blue light of her phone. She laughed, a sudden, sharp sound that was different from her usual warm chuckle. It was a private sound, one I wasn't a part of. "What's so funny?" I asked, scraping the rice from the sides of the pan. She looked up, her expression a strange mixture of mischievous and hesitant. "You're going to think this is so stupid," she began. And that should have been the first alarm bell. I downloaded Tinder. I stopped stirring. The only sound was the gentle sizzle of the risotto and the drumming of the rain. "You what?" The question came out flatter than I intended. "Oh, don't look at me like that, Lucas," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's not like that. My friends at work, Lena and Chloe, they're all on it, and the stories they tell are just hilarious. The men, the profiles, the awful pickup lines, it's like a game. It's just for a laugh." A laugh. That's how she sold it. Not as a tool for connection, not as a marketplace for lonely hearts, but as a source of entertainment, a digital zoo where she could observe the strange mating rituals of the single species from the safety of our marital cage. She elaborated, her voice full of a brittle brightness that I now recognize as the sound of a lie being constructed. "It's just for fun, really, an ego boost. I'm not going to talk to anyone seriously. I just want to see who's out there, to see who likes me. It's like window shopping, but for people." She laughed again, trying to draw me into the joke. And because I loved her, because I trusted her, because the alternative was too monstrous to contemplate, I let myself be drawn in. I told myself it was my own insecurity flaring up, that primitive, possessive part of the male brain that sees a threat in every shadow. To object would be to admit that I thought our marriage was fragile enough to be threatened by a silly app. It would make me seem controlling, weak, the jealous husband stereotype. So I played along. I forced a smile. "All right," I said, turning back to the risotto, the wooden spoon suddenly heavy in my hand. "Just don't run off with some handsome Swedish architect named Magnus." She giggled, the sound echoing with relief. "No promises." In the beginning, it truly did feel like a game. She'd call me over to the sofa, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Look at this one, Lucas. He's posing with a sedated tiger." Or, "Read this bio. It's pure poetry. Just a regular guy looking for an irregular girl. What does that even mean?" We'd laugh together, scrolling through a parade of shirtless men in bathroom mirrors, men holding large fish, men standing awkwardly in front of famous landmarks. It felt like our joke, a shared secret. I felt included in the absurdity of it all. I'd sit beside her, an arm around her shoulder, and we'd swipe left, 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 a ruthless, godlike duo casting judgment from our comfortable couch. She'd show me her matches, a collection of faces that had swiped right on her. "See," she'd say, nudging me, "still got it." And I'd smile and kiss her, feeling a strange mix of pride and a low, thrumming unease. The pride was that other men found my wife beautiful. The unease was that they were now being invited to do so. The shift was gradual, almost imperceptible at first, like the slow creep of a tide. It wasn't a single event, but a series of tiny changes in the atmospheric pressure of our home. Her phone, which had once been a communal object left on the coffee table or the kitchen counter, was now always with her. It lay face down on the bedside table at night, a silent, dark slab of secrets. Before, she would charge it in the kitchen overnight. Now it was plugged in beside our bed, within arm's reach. The notifications were the first thing to be silenced. That small ping of a new message, a sound I'd never given a second thought to, disappeared. But its absence was louder than its presence ever was. I'd notice her picking up her phone, her thumb swiping at something, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips. When I'd ask what she was smiling at, the answer became vaguer. "Oh, just a message from Lena," or "a funny video Chloe sent." The shared laughter over ridiculous profiles stopped. When I'd ask to see, she'd say, "Oh, it's boring now, all the same old weirdos," and lock the screen. The game was no longer a spectator sport. It had become a single-player experience. The unease inside me started to curdle into something more solid, something that sat in my stomach like undigested food. I began to watch her, and I hated myself for it. I became a detective in my own home, cataloging changes in her behavior. The extra time she took getting ready in the mornings, the new lingerie I saw in the laundry basket that I'd never seen on her, the way she'd take her phone with her even just to go to the bathroom. A little voice in my head kept screaming that something was wrong, that I was a fool. But a louder, more desperate voice told me I was being paranoid. I was creating a problem where none existed. Anja was a good person. Our marriage was strong. This was a test of my trust, and I was failing it. I tried to bring it up once, casually. We were in the car, driving out of the city for the weekend. "Still playing that Tinder game?" I asked, keeping my tone light, my eyes on the road. I felt her tense beside me. "Sometimes," she said, a little too quickly. "It's pretty boring, to be honest. I should probably delete it." She didn't delete it. That night, in the little cottage we'd rented, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the silence of the countryside. Anja wasn't in bed. I found her in the living room, sitting in the dark, bathed in the familiar blue glow of her phone. She was so engrossed she didn't hear me approach. I saw her smile, a genuine, unguarded smile, the kind she used to give me. And then I saw her thumb move, typing rapidly. The sight sent a spear of ice through my chest. I retreated back to the bedroom, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the space beside me in the bed grow colder and wider until it felt like a canyon. The joke was over. The laughter had died. I just didn't have the proof yet. And a part of me, a desperate, cowardly part, didn't want to find it. Because as long as I didn't know for sure, I could pretend that everything was still okay. I could pretend that the woman sleeping in the next room was still the same woman I had married. The game had rules, she'd said. It was just for fun. But as I lay there, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the night, I knew with a chilling certainty that she had started playing a different game entirely, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules. The fine line between a joke and betrayal, I realized, is trust. And like a hairline crack in a precious vase, ours was slowly, silently beginning to shatter. I just hadn't seen how deep the damage went yet. That week, back in the city, the atmosphere was thick with things unsaid. Anja was either overly affectionate, her hands always on me, her voice a little too bright, or she was distant and irritable, snapping at me for leaving a cup on the counter or for asking what she wanted for dinner. Her mood swung like a pendulum, and I was constantly trying to find my footing on the shifting ground of her temperament. I was walking on eggshells, afraid that any sudden movement would cause the whole fragile structure of our life to collapse. The phone was the third person in our marriage. It sat on the dinner table between us, a silent arbiter of our failing connection. She would angle the screen away from me, her shoulders slightly hunched over it in a protective curl. Who was she protecting it from? Me, the one person she was supposed to share everything with. The irony was suffocating. I felt a profound loneliness, a loneliness that is only possible when you are sitting right next to someone you love. The secretiveness was a poison, seeping into every interaction. Our intimacy dwindled, the affection feeling performative. When we made love, it felt like she was somewhere else, her mind occupied by thoughts I wasn't privy to. The invisible wound of emotional betrayal was already festering long before I knew the full extent of the physical one. It was a breakdown in communication, a slow, painful erosion of the trust that had been the bedrock of our entire world. I felt myself becoming a person I didn't recognize. I was suspicious, anxious, my mind constantly racing, replaying small moments, searching for clues. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, questioning my own judgment. Was I the problem? Had I become so boring, so predictable, that she needed to seek validation from strangers on the internet? The self-doubt was a cancer, eating away at what little confidence I had left. I was trapped in a state of hypervigilance, always watching, always listening for the click of a keyboard, the ghost of a smile on her face when she looked at her phone. This wasn't a game, it was psychological warfare, and I was an unarmed combatant. The breaking point arrived on a Thursday. It was our anniversary, 11 years. I came home early, clutching a bouquet of peonies, her favorite, and a reservation at the small Italian restaurant where I had proposed. I walked in to find the apartment quiet. She was in the shower, the sound of water drumming against the tiles. And there, on the bedside table, was her phone. It was unlocked. The screen was lit up, a message preview glowing on the dark surface. It wasn't the message itself that stopped my heart, but the name above it. Etienne. I didn't know any Etienne. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the peonies drooping in my hand. My conscience was screaming at me to walk away, to respect her privacy, to not cross that line. But I had a terrifying premonition that my entire life, everything I believed to be true, was on the other side of that line. My hand trembled as I picked it up. My thumb hovered over the notification, and in that moment of hesitation, the last vestiges of the man who blindly trusted his wife died. I tapped the screen, and the game ended. The world as I knew it, the carefully constructed reality of my 11-year marriage, didn't just crack, it exploded into a million razor-sharp pieces. I saw not one message, but a history, a novel of deceit written in glowing text. It started innocently enough, weeks ago. Playful banter, compliments, the kind of light-hearted flirting she had told me about. But then the tone shifted. The messages became more frequent, more intimate. They talked about their days, their dreams, their frustrations. He knew things about her that I didn't. He knew about the argument she'd had with her boss, the one she told me went fine. He knew about the creative writing class she wanted to take, a dream she had never shared with me. They had a whole world, a secret garden of inside jokes and shared intimacies, and I was locked on the outside. The emotional betrayal was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Then I scrolled further. The plans to meet for a harmless coffee. The description of that first meeting, how his eyes were even more striking in person, how her heart had hammered in her chest. The messages after that coffee became bolder, the flirting tipping over into explicit desire. They talked about what they wanted to do to each other. The words on the screen were graphic, passionate, and utterly devastating. They were a script for a life she was living without me. And then I found it, the confirmation. Messages from 2 weeks prior, arranging to meet at a hotel in the city center on a night she told me she was having a work dinner. There were messages from the day after. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? The peonies slipped from my grasp, scattering their delicate pink petals across the floor. A strange, keening sound filled the room, and it took me a moment to realize it was coming from me. The water in the shower stopped. I heard the door open, heard her humming a cheerful tune. She walked into the bedroom, a white towel wrapped around her hair damp, a smile on her face. The smile vanished when she saw me standing there, her phone in my hand, my face a mask of utter desolation. The game, she had said, it was just a game. But as I stood there, amidst the ruins of our life, with the evidence of her betrayal glowing in my hand, I finally understood. It had always been a game. But I was never one of the players. I was just the board on which it was played. The silence that fell between us was not empty. It was dense and heavy, filled with the shrieking ghosts of every lie she had ever told me. Her face, still flushed from the heat of the shower, drained of all color. The towel she held, clutched at her chest, seemed like the only thing holding her together. I watched her eyes dart from my face to the phone in my hand, the little blue and white bubbles of text, a stark confession in the dim light of the bedroom. I didn't have to say a word. She knew that I knew. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was in that moment I saw the real Anja, not the wife I had constructed in my mind over a decade, but a stranger capable of a depth of deception I couldn't have fathomed. The first words she managed to push out were the most pathetic, most insulting defense imaginable. "You went through my phone?" The accusation, the attempt to turn the tables, to make me the villain for uncovering her treachery, was so audacious it was almost laughable. Almost. But there was no laughter in me. There was only a vast, cold emptiness. I didn't respond. I just continued to look at her, my expression unreadable, letting the weight of what I had found hang in the air between us. I wanted her to squirm in it, to suffocate in the truth. "Lucas, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, taking a hesitant step towards me. It was flirting. It got out of hand. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. 3 words to dismiss 1,000 secret messages. 3 words to erase clandestine meetings, to nullify a connection she had nurtured in the shadows of our marriage. The emptiness inside me began to fill with a slow, burning rage. I still didn't speak. I simply raised the phone and tilted the screen towards her, my thumb scrolling slowly, deliberately, through the messages with Etienne. I watched her face crumble as her own words scrolled past, her proclamations of desire, her memories of their time together, her plans for their future encounters. Each message was a nail being hammered into the coffin of our marriage. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the towel slipping slightly from her grasp. "We only met for coffee," she whispered, her voice a threadbare lie. "Lucas, you have to believe me." I stopped scrolling at a particular message from her to him, dated from the night of her work dinner. The one where she described, in vivid detail, the feeling of his skin against hers. I held the phone out. My voice, when it finally came, was a rasp, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. "This was some coffee, Anja." That's when the dam broke. The tears came, hot and furious. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity, of a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "I don't know how it happened," she cried, her words tumbling over each other. "It started as a joke, just like I told you. It was a game. I was bored, and it was just exciting. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you." She kept repeating it, the phrase that had become the anthem of her betrayal. "It was just a game." That word, game, hammered into my brain. A game has winners and losers. A game has rules. What were the rules here? Was the rule to not get caught? Was the prize a fleeting moment of excitement in a hotel room with a stranger? And what was I? The unsuspecting pawn to be sacrificed? The rage finally boiled over. I threw her phone against the wall. It hit with a sickening crack and clattered to the floor, the screen dark and shattered. "A game?" I roared, the sound tearing from my throat, raw and full of a pain so immense I felt it might split me in two. "You call this a game? You stood here, in this home we built. You looked me in the eye and you lied to me, day after day. You laughed with me about the stupid profiles while you were arranging to meet one of them. You let me comfort you when you were stressed about work, when the real stress was juggling your husband and your lover. That's not a game, Anja. That's a betrayal of everything we were." I was pacing now, a caged animal in the wreckage of my own life. The scattered peonies on the floor looked like drops of blood. Did you think of me at all? When you were with him, did my face ever flash through your mind? The 10 years we spent together, our home, our life, did any of it mean anything to you? Or was it all just part of the boring routine you needed to escape from? Her sobs were louder now, but they had no effect on me. They were just noise. She tried to reach for me, her hand outstretched. "Lucas, please, we can fix this. I love you." I recoiled as if her touch would burn me. "Love?" I spat the word out. "You don't know the meaning of the word. The woman I loved wouldn't be capable of this. The woman I loved wouldn't have systematically dismantled our life for a cheap thrill from a dating app. I don't know who you are anymore." And in that moment, I knew it was the absolute truth. I looked at the weeping woman on my bed, and I felt nothing but a profound and desolate sense of alienation. The connection we had shared, the invisible thread that had bound us together for a decade, had been severed. It wasn't a fraying rope, it was a clean, brutal cut. There was nothing left to hold on to. The argument raged for hours, a hurricane of pain and accusation that left us both utterly exhausted. Her defenses shifted from denial to justification to desperate pleas for forgiveness. She blamed her boredom, her midlife crisis, my perceived lack of attention. She threw everything at the wall, hoping something would stick, some excuse that would mitigate the enormity of her actions. But it was all just static. The core of it remained unchanged. She had made a choice. She had chosen to deceive, to betray, to seek comfort and excitement in the arms of another man. The trust was not just broken, it was annihilated. It was a scorched earth policy, and our marriage was the casualty. By the early hours of the morning, there was nothing left to say. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind only the cold, gray ashes of our relationship. The silence returned. But this time, it was a funereal silence, a silence of endings. "You need to leave," I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "Pack a bag. I want you gone by the time I get back." She looked up, her face swollen and stained with tears. "Where will I go?" "I don't care," I said, and the scariest part was that I meant it. I walked out of the bedroom, stepping over the broken phone and the crushed flowers. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the apartment, out of my life as I knew it. The city was just beginning to wake up, the sky turning a soft, bruised purple. I walked for hours, with no destination in mind, the cold morning air a sharp contrast to the fire that had consumed my world. The game was over. She had lost. He had, presumably, won. And I was left to survey the ruins, a casualty in a war I never even knew I was fighting. The line between a joke and a betrayal isn't thin. It's a chasm. And she had leapt across it without a moment's hesitation, leaving me alone on the other side. The days that followed are a blur of muted gray. I moved through my life like a ghost, haunting the rooms of my own apartment. Her absence was a physical presence, a void that sucked all the air and color out of the world. I'd find a stray hairpin of hers on the bathroom floor, or catch the faint scent of her perfume on a pillow, and the grief would hit me with the force of a physical blow, leaving me breathless and doubled over. The silence in the apartment was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I had asked her to leave, and she had. She had gone to stay with her friend Lena, one of the architects of the game. I couldn't help but wonder if Lena knew, if she had been a confidant in Anja's deception. The thought made me feel sick. Every memory of our life together was now contaminated, viewed through the filthy lens of her betrayal. Our laughter on the sofa as we scrolled through profiles felt like a cruel performance. Our anniversary dinners, our weekend trips, every "I love you" she had ever uttered now seemed like a line from a script. Was any of it real? Or had I been living in a beautifully constructed lie for months, maybe even years? The psychological toll was immense. I couldn't sleep, and when I did, my dreams were haunted by images of her with a faceless man. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the feeling of betrayal as fresh and raw as it was in that first moment of discovery. I experienced intrusive thoughts throughout the day, replaying the words in her messages over and over in my head until I felt like I was going insane. It felt like a form of trauma, a post-infidelity stress disorder that left me anxious, paranoid, and emotionally numb. My self-esteem was in tatters. It was impossible not to internalize her actions, to believe that her affair was a reflection of my own inadequacies. Was I not handsome enough? Not interesting enough? Not attentive enough? The questions were a relentless chorus of self-blame, a cruel torture chamber of my own making. I had to force myself to eat, to go to work, to pretend that my world hadn't been obliterated. Friends would call, and I would let the calls go to voicemail. What could I say? Sorry I can't meet for a drink. My wife's Tinder game turned out to be a full-blown affair, and I'm currently trying to remember how to breathe. The shame was a heavy cloak I couldn't take off. Telling my family was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Explaining to my parents, who had adored Anja, that the daughter-in-law they cherished had been living a secret life felt like a betrayal in itself. I saw the pity in their eyes, and I hated it. I didn't want to be an object of pity. I wanted my life back. A week after she left, she started messaging me. Long, rambling texts filled with apologies, excuses, and declarations of undying love. She begged me to see her, to talk, to go to counseling. She promised she had cut all contact with Etienne, that she had deleted the app, that she would do anything to earn back my trust. But how could I ever trust her again? Trust is not a switch that can be flipped back on. It's a delicate ecosystem, built over years of shared vulnerability and honesty. She had taken a flamethrower to ours. Rebuilding seemed impossible. The very foundation was gone. I ignored her messages for weeks. I needed the space, the silence, to even begin to process the magnitude of what had happened. I started keeping a journal, a place to pour out all the anger and pain that was poisoning me from the inside. I wrote for hours, filling pages with my rage, my confusion, my profound sadness. It was a small act of self-preservation, a way to regulate the emotional storm raging within me. I also started seeing a therapist. Talking to a neutral third party, someone who wasn't emotionally invested, was a lifeline. She helped me understand that Anja's choices were not a reflection of my worth. They were about her own issues, her own emptiness, her own inability to communicate her needs in a healthy way. It was a difficult concept to accept, but slowly, painfully, I began to untangle my sense of self from the wreckage of our marriage. We met 3 months later in a sterile lawyer's office to sign the initial separation papers. She looked smaller, thinner, her eyes shadowed with a weariness that mirrored my own. We were polite, our conversation stilted and awkward, two strangers who had once known every inch of each other's bodies and souls. Seeing her didn't bring the explosion of anger I had expected. Instead, I just felt a deep, aching sadness for what we had lost, for the life we were supposed to have. The legal process was a slow, grinding machine, but with each paper signed, with each asset divided,
I felt a tiny piece of myself returning. I was no longer just the betrayed husband. I was Lucas again. I started reconnecting with friends, forcing myself to be social, even when all I wanted to do was hide. I rediscovered hobbies I had let slide, started running again, feeling the burn in my lungs and the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement as a form of therapy. Healing isn't a linear process.
There are good days where the sun feels warm on my skin and I can imagine a future for myself. And there are bad days when a song on the radio or a glimpse of a couple holding hands can send me spiraling back into the darkness. The scars of this betrayal will likely never fully fade. It has changed my ability to trust, made me more cautious, more guarded. I fear it might affect my future relationships, this constant vigilance for signs of dishonesty. I look back on the man I was before all this, open, trusting, a little naive perhaps, and I mourn him almost as much as I mourn the marriage. He was a casualty of the game too. Anja's justification that Tinder was just for fun or an ego boost now seems so tragically transparent. It was a symptom of a deeper problem, a crack in her own foundation that she chose to patch with a cheap plaster of outside validation instead of doing the hard work of looking within, or, God forbid, talking to me. Our story is a cautionary tale about the insidious nature of digital infidelity. It's about how secrecy, even in small doses, can be a cancer that metastasizes until it consumes a relationship from the inside out. It highlights that an emotional affair can be just as, if not more, damaging than a purely physical one, because it corrodes the very soul of a partnership. The line between a joke and betrayal isn't a line at all. It's a choice. It's the choice to honor your commitments or to seek validation elsewhere. It's the choice to communicate your unhappiness or to hide it behind a glowing screen. It's the choice to protect your partner's heart or to sacrifice it for a fleeting thrill. Anja made her choice, and in doing so, she ended our game, our life, our story. Now I have to learn how to write a new one on my own. I've told you my story. Now it's your turn. What's the one experience that showed you people aren't always who they seem? Share your answer in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Reddit Whispers.